Welcome to First Take, the podcast where we explore important topics related to faith, culture, and the human experience. On this episode, we are discussing a topic that affects us all, leadership. The title of this episode is Who is Leading Who? We'll be talking about the concept of leadership and how it shapes our lives. Seth is joined by two impactful leaders in our area, LaRocque and Ross Blankenship. These men have proven their leadership in the home, at work, church, and in their community. So, get comfy and join us for this discussion on leadership. Who knows, you might even learn something brand new. If you enjoy this conversation and look forward to more, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss an episode. This is the First Take Podcast. Let's get it.
Welcome back to the First Take Podcast. This is episode 12, and I've got some of my friends with me. This is Ross to my left. Say what's up, Ross.
What's up?
This is Mr. Kyle LaRocque to my right, and we're excited to hang out with you guys today. What y'all been up to?
Man, baseball is finally over for the two of us. So
yeah.
Other than that, man, just
Your oldest is playing?
The middle.
The middle one. Middle is playing.
So I guess that's been, keeping us somewhat busy, but enjoying summer otherwise. Just a nice break, hanging out on the river, playing, been good.
Cool. What about you?
Yeah, man.
More of the same?
Yeah, getting ready to take a little vacation trip.
Yeah.
Starting tomorrow, wrapping up. We wrapped up our season, but not so much on the business side.
Mm-hmm.
We're still very much in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So this weekend vacation will be a nice little getaway.
Cool. You got to tell me about Omaha.
Yeah.
Because I heard you went to the second game. What was that like?
I went to the first and second.
The first
game.
and the second game.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we got a wild hair on Friday. One of my good friends texted me and was like, "Hey, man, you want to go to Omaha?" And I sent back, "Seriously?" and so that's all it took,
Yeah.
And I was dropping my wife off at the airport on Friday at like 2:00.
Heck
and
yeah.
On the way there, I told her, "Hey, by the way, me and Colin are going to go to Omaha." And she said, I knew it. I knew this was going to happen. And so we left. I dropped her off at the airport, and then we left. We drove straight to Omaha and stayed in Joplin, and then went to the game. We had awesome seats. It was the best game on Saturday and the worst game on Sunday, and then we drove back on Sunday. So we didn't stay for the Monday game, but it was a blast.
For our listeners, this will come out a little bit later, but he's referring to the College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska, that LSU did win. And so we're talking to our future self here, guys, because this will be out in a month or so. But that's awesome, man. I'm glad you got to experience that. So today we are talking about who's leading who and the idea of leadership, and we're going to get into that. But this is the First Take Podcast, and so we like to do first takes. And so last episode we had some friends on here. You guys know John, Amber, and Chance, and we were talking about how to read the Bible and not hate it and actually enjoy it. And one of the comments that was made was, we were talking about translations, and I don't know if you guys know, but there's a Gen Z Bible translation. And so I'm going to get y'all's reaction, your first take to some Gen Z Bible verses. I'm going to read the Gen Z version, and you're going to try and guess the actual verse.
Okay.
So if you get close, that's cool. If you can remember the verse, you don't have to have like the exact scripture reference and all that. But here we go. You guys ready for this? Mm-hmm. I don't think you are, but okay. All right.
Great way to start, Seth.
So since we got the whole crowd watching, let's drop the baggage and the spiritual L's we've been clutching and run it up with the race ahead. Any idea?
It's definitely a Paul comment. A Paul quote.
I would agree.
Maybe. No guesses?
Paul in 2023.
All right. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Hebrews chapter 12.
Could possibly. We're still undecided on who wrote Hebrews.
That's true. Let's find us one more. Let's find a good familiar one.
How many copies have been sold of that?
I don't know.
Not me.
Someone showed it to me on Instagram, but I was also told that I have another person that I will leave nameless for the sake of their integrity. They have a paper copy.
Oh, all right.
So, yeah. I think they bought it as like a joke, but
It's John Louvier.
I was going to guess that as well.
let's hope not. The struggle is real, but it's lit because I got his power putting in the work.
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
That's a really good guess, but no.
You read that again?
The struggle is real, but it's lit because I got his power putting in the work.
This is ridiculous.
Abigail's cracking up back there.
Give it to us.
For this I toil, struggling with all his energy that he powerfully works within me. Colossians 1:29.
Man.
There you have it. The Gen Z Bible that I hope no one actually reads. But with that being said, we'll get into the First Take podcast. We're talking about leadership today, and these are two guys that are involved in many facets of leadership. And so we'll start off just, guys, introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about what you do, a little bit about your life, relationships, marriage, kids, all that sort of stuff. We'll start with you, Ross.
Okay, yeah. So I'm 40 years old. My name is Ross Blankenship. I'm from here in Moss Bluff. Grew up here. Went to this church for a long time. I'm married. We celebrated our 15-year anniversary yesterday.
Congratulations,
Sarah and I. So that was a blessing. Yesterday was a really big day of reflecting on how grateful I am to have such a beautiful wife that is so forgiving. And I've got two kids. My oldest is Kinley. She's 12, and my youngest is Colin. He's 9. And so, yeah, what I do for a living is I own a business. I was a coach for 12 years, a high school coach, and those relationships led me into
What sport?
Baseball.
Cool.
I coached football and baseball, but I would consider myself a baseball coach. But so those relationships led me into the business I have now. I run a company called 2D Sports, where we're basically a tournament logistics company. So we operate events throughout the Southeast region and run volleyball events, run softball events, but primarily baseball. So I'm still involved in the game, but on the other side. And I coach my son's 8-year-old team, coach pitch team. I'm the pitcher. But I'm retiring this year because we're moving up to 9U. And But that's what I do, and but that's not who I am. I gave my life to Christ at 36, which was only 4 years ago. It's been quite an amazing journey of what God's done inside of me and my family, and how He's used our story. He has given Sarah and I the opportunity to really minister to the brokenhearted, just through our story of what we've been through, and the repairs of our marriage that He's done.
Yeah.
We find ourselves today connecting with a lot of couples and individuals that are going through some pretty tough stuff. And God's put us there, prepared us, equipped us to deal with that. And so every day there's an opportunity for it to be really heavy for us, and to be really deep and emotionally connected in some people's lives that really need someone to walk alongside of them. But it's also, there's so much joy in that. Out of that has come a ministry called Fight Club, which Kyle has been involved in. You've been involved in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of men in our community that are involved in it. And Sarah handles the women on that side in Journey and walks with them. So that's more of who we are than what we do.
Right.
And if you asked me what I am the most proud to be involved in, business is great. It's great to do that. It's great to coach, but to walk alongside people in their relationship with Christ and be able to disciple them and allow them to disciple me is what Sarah and I are find joy in each and every day. And so if everything else was to be given up and go away, and that was still standing, we would find much joy and hope in it.
Man, that's awesome, and it's been a joy to be able to witness that from afar and up close in some contexts over the last, like you said, 4-5 years.
Yeah.
So I affirm all that. Kyle, what about you?
Yeah, Kyle LaRocque. I'm also born and raised here in the Bluff. Ross and I actually grew up together for the most part, and so it's fun to be here with him today. But married to Samantha. We've been married 16 years,
Heck yeah.
heading towards 17, and she is absolutely my better half. I am incredibly blessed by her often, and I couldn't be more grateful for her. We have 3 children, 3 boys, Bryson, Jackson, and Grayson. They're 12, 8, and 3.
So you're busy.
Yeah, that they definitely the baby is a handful, and in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Call him the hammer. He's just man. He is funny. He is loud. He's always trying to find his voice in a group of loud individuals already. So he just walks into the room and proclaims his presence. So it's real funny to watch him. But blessed by those boys. It's a responsibility certainly to point them in the direction towards being young men that are going to follow after Christ and be godly men and husbands one day. And I know that is something that God has called Samantha and I to, and it's absolutely one of my favorite things about life these days. Otherwise, man, I run a company called LaRocque Homes. We're a custom home builder, remodeler. Been doing that here locally for about 11 years. Prior to that, I went to A&M, and then I moved to Houston.
We'll forgive you for that.
Yeah, gig 'em. So I moved to Houston following that and started building homes for a big company there, and kind of learned the ropes, made my way up through the chain of command there. And in 2005, I started my first company in Houston, and it was also a kind of a high-end remodel company. And I ran that all the way up until the end of last year. And if you can imagine, driving while I lived in Houston, from Houston to Lake Charles to get this thing off the ground, and then I moved back home in 2015 and driving from here to Houston for another 7 years.
That's brutal.
I hate that drive. I detest it. And
especially now with all the construction.
Yeah.
The 1 lane and
it is
1.5 lanes, but really is what it is.
So
Beaumont's been under construction.
that is a story all on its own on what God walked me through and being able to release that company in essence, which was kind of my first child actually. But since being home, we've started a few other ventures. We own a custom cabinet shop, which is really just more of a supply chain thing for our home building company. So I'm in the middle of that and doing a handful of other things. And we talked a little bit about Fight Club, so I've been able to be involved in that, and that's been a wonderful ministry to be a part of. We're also involved with Faith Walk pretty heavily. Faith Walk is an incredible ministry that is. It's really just, we talk about leadership, but it is a platform and a springboard to raise up leaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
To go back to their home church and serve. And
just regular men, like every day,
and women.
and women. Yes. Just from all aspects of life.
Yeah. So I've been fortunate enough to serve as the chair of that board this year, and that's been a great opportunity. I'm looking forward to passing that baton off at the end of this year. But I've been blessed by that, and just looking forward to the days ahead, seeing where God's going to take us in life, and like Ross, just getting to serve with my bride in whatever capacity we can to try to point people to the Lord and encourage them. She's unique. She's a licensed clinical therapist, and so, but she has a heart for the Lord, and so. Her take is what does the Bible say about what's going on in your life, and what does the Lord say about what's going on in your life? And so she's actually started her own company outside of her practice called Holy Restored Ministries, and she's had incredible opportunities to speak on mental health and adolescent health and things like that, and that she's just not only clinically trained, but certainly from a biblical perspective, what's the Lord got to say about that? And so I love watching her grow and lead as well in the capacity that she's been afforded. But that's where we're at.
Man, that's awesome, guys. I've been able to serve with you both on both of your leadership endeavors inside the church and then outside the church with Faith Walk. Yeah. And I just want to affirm you guys. It was awesome and both of those experiences, whether it be leading worship for something with Faith Walk or being a part of a group, or Kyle, you were a lay leader on a Faith Walk, and so I got to lead worship with that, and that's one of the reasons that I thought that you guys would be great for the podcast to have you on to talk about just the facets of leadership and how I have this general belief, and I think that you guys would as well, that we are all leaders in some form or fashion, and it's just a matter of who we are leading and where we are leading them to, whether that be as a parent, as as an owner of companies, or as a group leader, as a husband. And so I just want to start off today by talking about, what do you think leadership is in its most simple form, in its most simple definition, and what does that maybe mean to you? How have you come back to that, maybe even? So let's just talk about that, and either one of you guys can go first.
Yeah, I would say leadership in its simplest form for me is just simply pointing someone in a direction. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you think about leading someone or being in front of the pack or whatever it may be, someone is pointing a group of individuals or an individual towards a certain direction or towards a certain vision. So in its simplest form, where are you leading them? Mm-hmm. Who are you leading and where are you leading them? I think that's when you think about that, you can come up with a vision for what your leadership is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And I mean, you could even break it down even further in terms of, folks that struggle with assuming a role of quote unquote leadership. I mean, you wake up every day and you have the opportunity to lead your own life. So you can start there in its simplest form. And Ross mentioned the word vision. Yes. And we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. But you got to know where you're headed. Yeah. Before you're ever going to get there, before you ever get anywhere. And so leadership is actually absolutely pointing someone or something in a direction, and then offering, a lot more parameters to that, defining vision, defining mission, defining purpose. Yeah. But it's on its simplest form. It's just having that idea that we're going to point it in a direction and we're going to go. Yeah.
If I had to put one word to it, I think that I would put the word influence. Like if I had to just cut it down to one word, that would be it. And but I think that, and maybe you guys disagree with me, but I think that in our culture, men and women alike, but especially men, maybe have a hard time understanding that they are all leaders in some regard. Why do you think that may be difficult for people to grasp? That they might diminish, like you guys are owners of companies or whatever, and I work at a church staff and in leadership of some form or fashion, but there are people out there that I think that diminish their specific roles of leadership because maybe that it's not on a platform. Why do you think that that's kind of a struggle in our culture, maybe?
Well, our culture glorifies certain types of leaders and certain levels of leadership, and I think people can get caught up in that to where, I have to be this certain big impact leader that impacts a multitude of people, and totally miss the boat that you have an opportunity every day to lead your son, that's right, or to lead your wife, or to lead the people that God has put in front of you. So, let's not make it a cultural thing to where what you watch on TV. And because there's some leaders in our world today that are absolutely pointing people in the wrong direction. Yeah. When there's a dad that's in his house that is discipling his son and pointing his son in the right direction, and that gets overlooked. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Who would you guys say might have been the most impactful leader to you, maybe at a young age, maybe now, at any point in your life that you look back on and say, man, like that person was it for me? And what maybe I'll add to that, what are some characteristics that they possessed that made them that?
Man, I've been extraordinarily blessed. Seth, I think you and I have talked a lot about this in the past, but I had a couple of outstanding grandfathers, and I was fortunate enough to have them and I'm 40, so, into my 30s, which is very rare. And I never took that for granted, and they taught me a lot of life lessons. I mean, and I'm talking how to love and serve the Lord first and foremost, but also things like work ethic, and just time with them was precious and valuable. And I miss them dearly, but I look forward to seeing them again. And then I was blessed with and am blessed with an incredible dad, and he was present and took opportunity to teach us things that matter. And again, there first and foremost that living for the Lord is priority number one. And he and my mom, they lived that out in front of us, and were great examples of how you should lead your house and how you make decisions that are going to be impactful for eternity and not just temporary. And so I'm just one of the lucky ones, man, frankly.
Yeah, I would second that as well. And you're right. We have talked about this. And
I know your grandpa and your daddy. So
yeah, man, for our listeners out there, like Ross mentioned, I don't think that there is a greater platform of leadership than a father or mother and a son or a daughter, or a grandfather and a grandmother and a grandchild. Like the family aspect of leadership, I think, is the biggest platform for leadership. And I think that God intended it to be that way. And so, I would second that for sure. Ross, what about you? Most impactful leader in your life?
Man, I've had some great coaches that have impacted me growing up, that pointed, when we talk about pointing in the right direction of how to, work ethic, play the game the right way, and
adversity,
be successful, overcome adversity, all of those things. Lots of great coaches in that area. My mom and dad taught me how to work hard and how to be grateful and humble. But over the last 4 years, on a spiritual side, someone that has invested time in me every week, multiple times a week. I find myself in this guy's office and in his groups probably 3 times a week. Roy Chapin, which is a biblical counselor here at the church. And man, I just value so much of his time, because everything that he does, he points me towards Christ. So he has absolutely discipled me and been leading me and been willing to do that over the last 4 years, and invested in me from nothing, from never have opened in the Bible and with any kind of intentionality to guiding me and walking me through it, and through my relational issues, through my own personal issues, through addictions, through just through raising my kids, everything, So he's a guy that I absolutely feel that I can go to, and he's gonna speak truth into me, and so man, he's been super impactful.
Yeah, I like you differentiated there the difference in your leadership that's impacted your life, and some qualities, but then also the spiritual side of things. How do you think that we as leaders make sure that we hit both sides of that coin? And because I think that I know men that that spiritually are very strong and rooted, but may lack a sense of vision and instillment for some of those like really great qualities that you mentioned: work ethic, the ability to face adversity, that sort of thing. How do you think that we can navigate both of those as men, as fathers, church leaders, whatever?
I mean, for me, I think it's understanding what's in front of you again, and people that may be spiritually strong but feel a little bit unable to process some of the additional leadership traits that they may could read in a book, or like Ross mentioned, see on TV, this and that. But I mean, it starts with defining some of this stuff. So what is work ethic? What is vision? What is purpose, right? And so as men, I mean, we can be passive individuals, or we can be aggressive individuals, and a lot of that I think has to just do with our own character makeup, but that doesn't necessarily need to define how we function in any given circumstance. And so, there's some learned traits that certainly are out there, and it requires work, and I can tell you this, if my dad was watching, he would absolutely agree and laugh. Like, I didn't have an extraordinary work ethic as a kid. Like, you get out there and mow the grass. Like, I wasn't about that life. You know what I mean? and like my brother and I laugh about it. I have a brother, he's about 4 years younger than me. And, so we laugh about stuff like that. But like when I went to college, I joined the Corps at A&M, and God just began to do a work in me that that this work ethic came into my life, and it was really born there, and we talked about adversity. We mentioned it, and I mean, there's a full year of nonsense. Basically, it's like a year of quote unquote boot camp, but at the same time you're a student, and so we call them core games. But if you can just imagine any way I can mess with you nonstop, mentally, physically, anything like that, just to play games. There's a lot of that goes on, and you have to decide at some point that you are strong enough mentally and physically to get through those things in order to the next level. And so that was a learned thing for me, and it wasn't because I didn't work as a kid or wasn't forced to work. Ross said like his parents instilled that in him. He didn't have a choice. I mean, like our dads had a shop next to each other, and we'd both be out there in 100 degrees building fires, burning cardboard right in between the buildings, and I can remember things like that. But like that wasn't a choice, because our parents wanted to instill that in us, but it wasn't really natural for me until later in life. So I think there's a lot of stuff like that is learned by doing, and you got to be willing to fail sometimes in order to get through it and be stronger on the other side. And so I think folks that are on the fence a little bit about, shying away from opportunities because it might bring some adversity, it might bring a little bit too much work requirement or things like that. Like, man, you just got to jump in. Yeah. You got to surround yourself with people that are willing to grab you and bring you along that journey and go for it.
Yeah, for our listeners there, I think what's important to note about both of these guys is, at different aspects in their lives, and what Kyle's talking about now is there was always a vision, and we mentioned it earlier. There's a vision for what could be, and for us, it has to be a vision of what God wants from us. And so having that at the forefront of our minds is huge, but it does, like you mentioned, it does require us going through things that may stink, it may hurt, and may be difficult. And so I like that you guys both mentioned that, especially the whole adversity idea. So as you've matured in your walk with Christ, like Ross for you over the last 4 years, Kyle for you from a younger age, how has your view and your approach to leadership just changed altogether? We'll start with you.
Yeah, so mine's changed tremendously. Just everything about my life has changed because of what Christ has began, the work that he's began in me. Early on, right out of college, I began to coach, and my goal was to simply prepare kids for life and to win a championship. And
you had success with that. Is that correct?
I did. I had success with that, and that was my goal. You know, so that was where I was pointing them. I was pointing them towards a championship, and that's what we worked towards every single day. There was no eternal purpose. There was no Christ involved in that. There was simply a coach that was trying to get them to a championship. And so that's how I led. When we talk about what is leadership, where are you pointing them? That's where I was pointing them. I was pointing my assistant coaches to one day be a head coach one day and move on to a program. And I wanted to be the best coach. I wanted to coach at the highest level. I wanted to move up the ladder, and I did all of those things. We won a championship. We got to, I got to what I would consider some of the top jobs in the state, at West Monroe and right here at Sam Houston.
Yes, sir.
And and at the end of the day, it has no eternal value. It was great. I taught kids how to play the game. I taught coaches how to coach. Yeah. And but it left me empty. It left me extremely empty. And when the game, which I idolized, some people it may be their job, their work. Mine was baseball. It was that lifestyle. When it was all taken away from me, a lot of it that had of my own doing. I would just make that clear. So, now what? Right. What's left? There's this void that was extremely empty. And that led me into a dark place, man. I was already struggling with a lot of things in my life, but that just really magnified them and spun me out of control because I lost my purpose. And I found myself in rehab, just not a couple years after that. what I thought I was supposed to be doing was not really what God had for me. That's where God met me, and changed my view on myself, on who He was, who He is, and gave me a new purpose. And man, since then, I was still running my business then, but with a different vision. Now my vision had changed from being a great coach to running a great business, and that's what I wanted to do. And then, and once I gave my life to Christ, at 36 years old in 2019, man, I began to realize that those things are great, and but they really have no eternal value, And so today, as I lead people, or attempt to lead people, I attempt to lead my business, and I attempt to coach my son's baseball team. I get a second shot at that. Yeah. I get to go back and try to do it right this time. My goal is much different, and our aim and our direction is much different, man. I want to be able to lead people, whether it be through baseball, through business, through Fight Club, whatever it is, and point them towards Christ. I'm not always successful at that. I often lose sight of that, to where I get caught up in winning games. I get caught up in being great at business and being successful, and I lose sight of that. But God always finds a way to bring me back and ground me and be rooted and grounded in that idea of, hey, this is your purpose. It's to point people towards me and to glorify me. It's not about me. It's not about me anymore. It's about Christ. And so my vision, to answer your question, how I've changed of leading, is where I'm pointing people.
Yeah, I want to come back to that, but I want your take on this before I ask a follow-up question there. What that same thing for you? How's your view on leadership matured and changed over the years?
I think the word there is just matured. I've just been seasoned and through some of the trials and adversity, and ultimately you have to learn to rest in Him. You have to be Ross mentioned purpose. I think a good word here is identity. I don't want to speak for him, but in essence, he just said his identity was wrapped up in being that coach pursuing the championship, and that shifted for him, and so for me as well. I mean, went through a pretty strong period of what I would consider workaholicism. I guess that's the right word, yeah. And that's kind of the Houston story. But I had to just get to the point to where I was absolutely willing to admit that my identity was in that, instead of my identity being solely in Christ, which is what He is calling me to. And as my perspective was evolving, and I was willing to let less of me be the driving force behind what was going on, and more of Him, I think my leadership style began to evolve as well, and it's certainly perspective. And it's my identity is in Him, and my perspective is He's my filter. So the decisions that I'm making am I pointing people to Him? Am I pointing my organizations towards Him? Am I creating a culture that says He is the number one priority in what we're doing? Or am I casting vision that says this is what we're about first and foremost? And so I think that's just been a maturation, a process of refinement. And that's, and like Ross said, I don't get it right all the time. I'm still, plenty of times hard charging in the wrong direction, and but God never fails to bring me back and ground me in what's important, and remind me of the calling that He's given me, which is to know Him and to make Him known, through the opportunities that He's put in front of me, whether it be business or coaching or Faith Walk or Fight Club or small group or greeting at the door, whatever. Know Him and make Him known, and so that's become a filter.
You guys, that sounds great. It sounds inspiring. It sounds. You're welcome. It sounds really good, but practically, that's some hard stuff we're talking about here. Yeah. It's a daily grind. And so, what's some practical tips that you can give me, that you can give our listeners that are that are maybe not business leaders and maybe not coaches and have super prominent roles in their church, but they're the plant worker that has 2 kids that's trying to serve Jesus. Like, practically, how do we come back to the focus of making him known in our jobs, making him known in our different other facets of leadership. So what do you guys have to say towards that?
I would say start discipling someone. Someone that's close to you, start discipling them. And, what does that look like? Maybe it's getting in the Word together. Maybe it's going through a book of the Bible together. Maybe it's here journaling together. Maybe it's praying together. When you start to define where you're going to point someone, then you got to find someone to point that way. And like we started this podcast off, it's like all of us really are leading someone. Someone's watching, whether it be in your work or in your home. So find out who's watching and begin to disciple that person because you're leading them somewhere.
Yep.
And if we're not leading them toward Christ, then where are we actually leading them?
Yeah.
And is that helpful or harmful? So for me, when I think about that, there's some guys in my life. I had to reboot myself just a couple weeks ago and go, man, these guys, God allowed me to be a part of the process of them coming to know Christ. Several of them I was able to baptize. And then, I started, what are they doing right now? Why am I not leading these guys? And so we started just going through the book of Ephesians and just together because I love the book of Ephesians. And so just reconnecting and starting, because I'd failed them in that area. I feel like I should be discipling them. And then also when it comes to your kids, just think about this. If everyone discipled their own kid, the whole world would be discipled, So, that's an impactful statement, and are we doing that? Or are we just allowing the church to do that? So. Yeah.
And I want to double down on that. And Kyle and myself are impacts of that, what you talked about, if everyone discipled their own kid. Like I truly believe that God's intent and the number one most effective form of discipleship is through the family from the beginning of time. And so for our listeners out there, if you're, Ross made some great points. Find out who's watching. If you have a kid, they're watching. That's the best place to start right there. And discipleship, include discipleship in that. And my parents did that for me. My grandparents did that from my parents on both sides. Kyle has a similar experience with that. And so start there if there's no other place to start.
My wife, this is something, for the women that are listening, because my wife does her and Kinley do like the seamless study together and the matchless study, or I don't know if it's matchless or it's match.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, but it sounds cool.
Well, there's studies of the book of the Bible that they do together. Yeah. So maybe Abigail, you can drop that in there. She knows it's a woman's study. Perfect. That's probably why you don't know, because you're not a woman. But my wife does it with our daughter, and it's something that she's 12. She's about to be a teenager, so that's a challenge in itself of how do you disciple a teenager, and so it's a really cool study that they do together. Colin and I will go through. I mean, he's just turned 9, so we've been going through it's not a comic book. What do you call that? The picture Bibles that has the stories in it. Illustrated Bible, yeah. That we go through, and it's. I've actually learned a lot going through that, and so it's something on his level that you do, and when you're leading them, how are you going to lead a teenager versus how are you going to lead a 9-year-old boy? Yeah, and that's a big difference.
Yeah, we'll put both of those or some form of that in the comments or the description or something. And if you're listening, man, and you have some of those resources, comment in the comment section about what are some good ways to lead our kids and piggyback off of what Ross said there. So,
and I would just add to it. I think it's defining your opportunities, and so everybody, like you said, everybody's leading somebody, but it has to start by really defining what that is or who that is, and there's accountability that is a weight to that when you're willing to accept it, and so it takes action. So it's defining your opportunity and then being willing to take action in some capacity. So like Ross said, I can't even call it a simple, but a first step is being willing to disciple somebody before you actually disciple them. So you have to have some kind of plan of action in place, and you got to think through it and process that beyond just understanding your opportunity. So Is it the people you work with? Is it your children? Is it your bride? It's all of those people,
Mm-hmm.
because the majority of us have that audience in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you are the lowest man on the totem pole at one of our local work, you have an audience of people above you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and one of the greatest things, one of the greatest rungs in leadership is actually followership, and you can lead somebody by the way you follow well. And I mean that's another topic perhaps, but like,
no, that's huge.
You can be an example to everybody that's trying to lead you by how well you follow. And you know, and I would say the next step beyond that would be a direct level leader. Now you're the guy that's, you know, right above that follower, because you're now, you know, carrying out some of the plan of the day. If you want to go to a work, you know, you're really pushing that paper down the line. Above that, indirect level leader, now you're kind of carrying out some of the vision that's been cast by the executive. You know, but everybody's got a place, and it's, you have to understand your opportunities, and then you need to understand the plan, and then you got to be willing to act. And so just to double that, I mean, for everyone listening, like, I would challenge you, sit down and write down your opportunities. You know, if it's your children, write down their names. And if it's your spouse,
really good
write
tip.
down their name. And if it's your coworkers, write down their name, because those are people that you directly impact every single day. Like Ross said, whether you like it or not, you're pointing them in one direction or another with the way that you handle yourself. And so that would be one challenge that I would offer in terms of an actionable step that people could do today.
That's really good. I want to come back to something that you mentioned that I really love, and you talked about leading from a place of following, and I want to add this to your comment there, but submission and followership throughout the Bible is at every level, even Jesus himself. Right. And so we cannot lead unless we are good followers. And I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that. But you know, think about the disciples that started the first century church and were agents of spreading the gospel all over the world. Before that, they were followers, and so and they became fishers of men. And so I think that's really cool that you mentioned that and hit on that. And I think that adds to the main point that we're talking about here, is that we're all leaders, and whether you are at the lower, like you said, the lower level, whether you're the college student that is just grinding, taking classes, working, looking to take the next step in life, there's a level of leadership there for you as well. So I want to back up a little bit. We mentioned adversity earlier in the podcast. Would you guys just be willing to share some leadership failures, some leadership challenges, some times where you've faced adversity through circumstances, or maybe it was self-imposed, and kind of how did you respond, and maybe what's some tips that you could give to our listeners with that? Is
this pre-Christ or after Christ?
Either or. We'll do after Christ to start with that.
Okay. Yeah, so you know, my pride gets the best of me a lot, and I don't like to fail, and I certainly hate to lose. So I will find myself often in this turmoil inside of me of how to respond to certain situations when I feel like I have been cheated or offended or attacked. And pre-Christ, it was always the same response. Where if I was challenged in that way, I was going to respond one certain way, and it was never Christ-like. But today, you know, I find not that I always respond the right way, but I find myself in turmoil. I think this relates to, because South Louisiana people are they're all angry, right? I figured that out. South Louisiana men, they're all angry. They're angry. They're angry.
Not wrong.
They're angry about something. You know, a lot of times it's their job or their situation or whatnot. That may be worldwide, but I'm just, you know, speaking here in South Louisiana, dealing with a lot of the men in Fight Club, is that we're all angry about something, and sometimes we don't even know what that is. And so when I get angry, you know, how do I respond? Because a lot of times you cannot control what happens to you. But the only thing that you can really control is how you respond. So as a leader, like we said, you're leading someone one way or the other. So those moments of responding, for me, are always a challenge because my pride gets in the way, and I have to remember, and I know this sounds cliche, but what would Christ do in this situation? But if someone is watching that you're leading, there was an opportunity, there was a specific situation that happened to me a couple years ago. I was about 2 years in my process of Christ, and God changed me, and I got into a situation to where I was confronted by a guy inside of my home that was doing some electrical work for me. I questioned some of the work that was being done, and this guy worked for a guy that I was discipling, and there was a confrontation inside of my home, and he said some things to me that in the past I would have never allowed someone to say to. But I found myself going inside, back and forth of the old Ross and the new Ross, of the old me saying, put a stop to this right now, and but Christ and the Holy Spirit inside of me is working out and going, no, Ross, how you respond is important here. And so I went back and forth. I can remember it probably 5 times of going, I'm going to beat this guy down to show grace and love. I'm going to beat this guy back and forth. And so the situation ended, and he left, and we resolved it. And I called my buddy that I was discipling, and still to this day, and he got heated, and he was mad for me.
Yeah.
And so I went and processed that with Roy, and he pointed out to me. He said, "Imagine what would happen to your buddy that I was discipling if he would have known that you would have beat this guy down. What would have happened to his walk?" And it put it in perspective to me of, it's not just about me. What I wanted to do in that situation would have only pleased me for a moment, but it would have absolutely ruined the person that I was leading in the walk, because he would have seen me react in a way that is not what I'm telling him that Christ is to do. Yeah. So it was such a reminder to me that, and that's leadership in its best, is that what I wanted to do would have impacted the people that were following. So that's one situation. For me, those situations seem to come up because I deal with the general public a lot. But it's a challenge to how you respond to people that do not act Christ-like towards you.
And you obviously, that was impactful. You're talking about something that happened several years ago, and you learned from it that's it was a stepping stone, I guess, for you. And so for our listeners, take that adversity, that leadership failure, or the close line, the close call, and springboard off of that to be a better leader, to be a better father, to be a better husband, to be a better boss, coworker, whatever. Kyle, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I wish I could echo. He just articulated that so well with something that I've recently walked through personally, and from the outside looking in, people really just haven't been able to fathom how I've responded to this circumstance, and but I feel like I've been as Christ-like as I can be, through it all, and because he said it, people are always following, people are always watching, and and I can use the word, there's a calling, there's an accountability, there's a responsibility. And you're either going to own it or you're not. Yeah. And if you want to shirk those duties for a split second, and you just want to let yourself get involved and your pride come out and go into attack mode, and all of those positive character traits that have been instilled in us through Christ, you have to backburner those in order to respond, proudly and selfishly and worldly in a sense, and because they are in direct conflict with one another. And so you have to have enough perspective about you and enough identity in him to be able to die to self in those moments. And I was telling somebody, I'm like, Marshall did an awesome job here recently if you need to check that sermon out. It's on forgiveness, but he just did it so well. And
the link will be in the description there.
Perfect. But I've been processing that, and he didn't mention this, but just processing. Think about it, like Jesus is on the cross, and he forgive them. They don't know what they do. And I mean, how can we not get past the circumstance of somebody being mean or somebody being, unforgiving or hurtful or whatever it is, he is our perfect high priest because he was able to do it. And if we're going to be Christ-like and be Christian, then we have to be willing to die to self and give it our best shot. Yeah. And so, it's just perspective, and it's being willing to live for him and not for self in those moments. And it's really hard. And leadership, if you're going to bear that burden and that responsibility, can be lonely. It can be a tough road. And that's why a lot of folks are not willing to walk that road. But, for me, the times that I've failed, that was your question, is whenever I just put Christ on the back burner and let Kyle be the response in some capacity, and the times that I've succeeded have been whenever I've kept my perspective all about, Ross said, how would Christ respond in this circumstance? Yeah. And I know that he is my guide. And so that's how I'm going to choose to respond. Regardless of the blowback that comes from that, I know that I'm right because he's told me so. And I know that, I can rest in that, and I can have peace in that. And when you experience that one time, 2 times, 3 times, multiple times, we talked a little bit earlier about a maturation process. You learn to trust him. You just learn to trust him in those moments, and your leadership expands, and I think your platform expands and your opportunity expands, because it just really does become more about trying to please him than even those that you're leading, because you know that he's got you and he will take care of the rest. And so I would offer that.
One of my favorite qualities that Jesus portrays in the scripture, and he calls himself this, but he's the good shepherd. Yeah. And anytime I think about leadership, I think about shepherding. And there's a book that I read recently that talks about shepherd leadership, and it doesn't mention Jesus. It's a business book. It doesn't mention Jesus, but I think that all of the premises were taken out of the Bible. And so we'll put that in the description as well, the link to that book. It's a great book. But the whole idea of leading like a shepherd, and that's what I think about. If we're not looking at that and following that, we don't know what it looks like. When you guys make the comment, how would Jesus respond? If we're not looking at the good shepherd, then we don't know. And so for our listeners out there, I want to wrap up like this, man. If you're looking to step into leadership in any capacity, first check who you're following. Check the vision that you have for your own life, and like these guys have said and doubled down on. It started with them following Jesus before they could ever lead anyone else, before they could take a step at leading kids, leading a business, coaching baseball teams, and whatever else. And so, man, check who you're following first before you step into leadership. And then when you get that down, I think I wrote down some of these practical steps. Find out who's watching. Find out who's under your influence. Write down the opportunities that you actually have to lead. And be okay with failure, because it's going to happen. Learn from those mistakes and get back up and get after it. And with the vision for your life that God has placed, and the vision for your family, for your coworkers, and for everybody else that you may come in contact with. So yeah, guys, you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I would just like to add this one last thing. This was
This
was told to me by a guy that influences me, I mentioned earlier. And he tells me this. He says, "You'll never have a vision for anyone else that is any bigger than your vision for your own life." So it's kind of hard to leave people, whenever you have such a small vision for your own self.
Yeah.
So
that's so good.
Yeah, that's all I've got.
That's good.
I think just from a practical sense, I think we could talk about that a little bit too. Well, vision is a fun word to throw around, but like just to throw it around and not actually process it is another thing. So if you're looking for some practical advice, sit down and think about what you want.
Yeah.
You know, what does vision really look like? And then again, like writing down opportunities, write down your vision. And that might be the 20-year plan, the 15-year plan, the 10-year plan. And if it's rooted in Christ, then ultimately everything's going to filter its way in that right direction. You know, if it's just a worldly vision, then that's TBD. But I would challenge you to write down that vision, and then, you know, you have to understand how you're going to get there. And so you need to begin to process practical steps. And I think, you know, we talk a lot about mission and culture and things like that in organization. And it's just like, I want people that work for me to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that we want to add value to people's lives through building and point them towards Jesus. And like, that's a very simple thing, but if that's not your filter every day in the field or in the office or whatever, and it doesn't pass that filter test, then you're probably wrong. Simple as that. Is it not adding value to our clients, you know? And so again, that's just defining something. It's just making something actionable in our lives that we can continue to work towards. How are we leading? Because it's all about direction. And perspective is that we have a hope in things eternal, right?
Absolutely.
And so when we can live a life with that perspective, everything else is going to be okay for certain. And so leadership should be about things eternal.
Absolutely.
Frankly.
That's so good. And like Kyle's talking about, if you're working through that vision and you're not sure about what God's vision is for you, go to the text, go to the Bible. That's where it starts, and then go from there. And we talked about that on the last episode about reading the Bible and the importance, and so check that out too, to help you with that. But guys, this has been super fun. I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. It's been fun to hear you guys be vulnerable, be honest, and just give your take on all of this. And so thank you so much, and I've had a great time. So.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yep. Check out the last episode, How to Read Your Bible and Not Hate It, and look forward to our upcoming episodes, episode 13, TBD in the future. Thanks, guys. Check you later.